and welcome to Living a Graceful Life. I'm your host, Denise Medved, and I'm also the creator and founder of the worldwide Ageless Grace brain health program. I'm here to remind you that it's never too late to begin making choices to create the life that you want to live. So, how would we create a graceful life? Do we have one already? What does it look like? What would it look like if we were to design or invite in a graceful life? Well, for some of you, it might be that you decide to set aside some time for yourself, or that you decide to take a course or a class, or take a walk in nature, or slow down and sort of smell the roses, so to speak. But it might be helpful for us to actually understand what the word grace means. So let's look at the Latin root, which is gratia or gratus. And basically, it believes that pleasure is what is the key and source of living a graceful life. So there are many things that could bring us pleasure and that we could invite in to our life on a daily basis. So there are many definitions of the word graceful also. Obviously, it means full of grace, full of pleasure. But what does that mean? So graceful also is defined from a physical point of view. Webster says that graceful is elegance of movement. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? It calls to mind visions of swans and ballerinas. But it also means moving through life gracefully, not just elegance of movement as you dance or as you swim, but as you navigate your daily life. Having an elegance of movement that also has poise and grace and balance to it. Who doesn't want that, right? Well, there's also the spiritual definition of grace, and that usually has to do more with the divine bestowing of grace upon us. It's something that's unexpected. It's something that we didn't ask for or try to deserve or earn. It's something that just happens. Usually it's only a few moments of grace, a door opening, an opportunity, a person stepping into our lives, a meeting, a chance glance. There are so many ways to have moments of grace that we feel are divinely bestowed upon us. At the same time, others can bestow grace on us. They can be a friend, a family member. They could even be a stranger. Sometimes those special rare moments of grace that come to us are not only unique and identifiable, but they are also life-changing. Think back yourself about moments that you might define as grace. Grace-filled, graceful. You might even want to pull out a pad and a paper and write down what it would look like to you if you had more grace in your life, or moments of grace that you specifically remember. I know that there were times in my life when certain people gave me a kindness or a chance, opportunity, or a recognition that changed the direction of my life. And I refer to those as moments of grace. Now, how would we go about inviting more of those moments into our life if we feel like we don't have them, or we don't have enough, or it's been a long time since we had moments of grace? Well, in order to do that, we have to understand a little bit about who we are. So I am not just this body that you see wearing these clothes with this color hair. I am more than that. I'm that and more. So I am the physical Denise the physical body that is Denise. And that includes the brain, which has complete control over every move that I make. It's all about controlling my movement. The brain is also the processor for something we call the mind, which is actually part of the mental realm. So the brain and the body are both part of the physical. And we need to nourish those things because that is the tool that we operate with in this world. The way I walk, the way I move, the way I go to my job, the way I interact with people is through this body. So I need to take good care of it. I always like to say to people that we probably take better care of our cars or our pets than we do ourselves. So who has control over what nourishes this physical part of us, the brain and the body? Well, we do. We might like to blame it on someone else. We might like to say, oh, I can't do this because of that or this. But the reality is we actually have control over movement, over food and nourishment that we put into our body that fuels the brain and fuels the body, over how much activity level we have that makes our body move with more comfort and ease and maybe grace. We're in charge. Regardless of where you live on the planet, regardless of how large your living space is, regardless of what job you have, what age you are, you're in charge of what do I put into my mouth and what do I decide to do every day that allows my body to move and have freedom and elegance and mobility, agility. We're in charge of those choices. So why wouldn't we choose to put good things into our body and to move well? You don't have to exercise, you don't have to sweat, you don't have to push, you don't have to drive. You have to continually decide how much movement will I get today, so that my body works, it's in its best working order, so that I can feel comfort and ease in everything I do. You all know, if you've ever had a trauma or an injury of any kind, that it's not pleasurable to feel pain or discomfort or limited movement. And so, again, grace, gratia, gratus, is pleasurable. So we can invite in a better way of moving, a better way of feeling due to the way we fuel ourselves. So there's the physical aspect of us. Now, I referred to the mind, which is different than the brain. The brain is an actual organ in the body, and it can be seen and touched by neuroscientists and neurosurgeons. It exists, and it's a visual, actual, tangible thing. The mind is invisible. It's in us, it's through us, it's around us, and it operates through the brain. Commonly described as a greater awareness or consciousness. It's that part of me, that anima, that has life force, that animates this body. So that mind can make decisions. It can use information. It can use experiences. It can use what it sees, what it feels, what it hears, and it can use the brain to process those things, integrate them, make decisions, come to conclusions, establish beliefs and mores. It decides who we are, who we want to be, how we want to operate, what we believe, how we feel about something, what are our passions. All of those things are decided by the mind, which is the mental realm of ourselves, and equally important to the physical realm of ourselves. So there's another part, the emotions. How do we feed the emotions? Well, interestingly enough, they are affected and brought about by outside circumstances very often. We can feel grief, we can feel joy, exultation, we can feel anger, we can feel wonder. All of these things can happen. And interestingly enough, what we sometimes forget is they can happen simultaneously, meaning there can be a joyful moment in my day, there can be a moment of wonder, there can be a moment of exuberance, and I can still be having grief over the loss of something dear to me or someone. So all of those emotions lay side by side, and that is called the emotional realm. Now, the interesting thing is that we actually have some power over which emotions do we give the most power to. Which emotions do we allow to sizzle and simmer? Which emotions do we allow to be full blown? We have some power over that, and it's through the brain. The brain produces chemicals, proteins, hormones, and some are not so positive, like cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And some are very positive, or can be very positive, like endorphins, oxytocin, serotonin, that can lift our mood, that can cause it to be raised and elevated to a higher level. So we do have some choice over how we activate those chemicals, because guess what? They're activated through movement and physical activity. Many of you know that when you go for a walk, a brisk walk, when you're angry or upset or emotional about something, that guess what? You start walking, you start moving, and the anger sort of balances out. It's not so overriding. You start to notice that there are other emotions like appreciation or gratitude for the nature that you're walking through. So physical movement can also help affect our emotions. So we have the physical self, the mental self, and the emotional self. And now we come to the spiritual self. So it also has two aspects to it. There is your spirit that is uniquely you, the spirit of you, your energy, your personality, that part of you that makes you you. I've been told that one way to describe your spirit is that is your unique thumbprint. There's no one who has a spirit like your spirit. So we need to nourish that spirit. And you know what makes you happy, what gives you pleasure, what lifts your spirits, literally and figuratively. What is it? Is it a walk? Is it an animal or a pet? Is it singing? Is it dancing? Is it moving? Is it painting? What are the things that nourish that part of you that loves those things and wants more of it? So that's another critical component to being able to have a graceful life. What nourishes you and feeds you? I love color. I love beautiful surroundings. So that's one reason I hold this TV show in this room, because I love this room. It makes me happy. I like the fire. I like the colors. Not far away where you can't see them, I have an old English sheepdog and a big orange Maine Coon cat. They feed my spirit. They nourish me. And all of you have those things. But ask yourself, have you been giving yourself the time and the opportunity to nourish your spirit? Have you put other things, other people, other obligations and responsibilities completely before yourself, so that you're not nourishing the spirit of you? Very, very important to living a graceful life. Now, the other part of that spiritual self is what I call spirituality, and it has a few aspects to it as well. Spirituality is usually a practice of some kind that we do daily, weekly, monthly, twice a day. And it's a practice that puts us in touch with something greater than ourselves, something divine, something that is a higher power, for example. And those practices cause us to connect to that and give us, guess what? Greater pleasure in our day, greater poise, greater balance, greater elegance of movement through our life and our day, more grace. So there are organized practices that go with different faiths and beliefs, where you might join with like-minded people, for example, and go to a specific place of worship, and you might celebrate together those things that you believe. You might be in front of an altar that has symbols on it that remind you of your spiritual practices and beliefs. But there's also another part to spirituality which is very individual, and that's your own personal practice. And you may have one or more already, or you may want to invite more grace into your life by choosing to have a spiritual practice. So what could that look like? What could that be like? Well, first of all, it could be reading at a certain time of the day, things that inspire you. It could be reading from a holy book or a poetry book or a book of daily devotions. It could be taking walks in nature and contemplating your surroundings or getting in touch with your five senses. It could be writing or journaling about thoughts that come to you as you sit quietly. It could be being still or meditating. It could be dancing and celebrating at a certain time every day, or at least once every day, or 3 times a week. It could be so many things that are your personal spiritual practice. So all of those parts of us, however, make up the whole that is you and that is me. And all of those parts want and seek more grace. So you are in charge of giving more grace to your physical self, your mental self, your emotional self, and your spiritual self. There are lots of tools that can help us do this. One is to just get started. Make a change. Say, tomorrow I'm going to do more of this, or I'm going to do this for the first time, or 3 times this week I'm going to make a place on my schedule to invite in more grace, physically, maybe mentally, maybe spiritually, maybe emotionally. Make a change. Put it on your calendar. Make yourself important, because when we have more grace, then we're also more capable of bestowing grace on others. A graceful moment, a graceful word, a graceful gift, a graceful appreciation. There are so many ways that we can enhance and enlarge the grace in our lives, which I remind you again is the pleasure in our lives, the pleasure quotient, the pleasure possibility of what we can have on a daily basis. Again, regardless of outside factors, those are choices that we make for ourselves. So one of the choices that I make on a daily basis is movement. I've already mentioned how that affects the physical body from a point of ease and comfort, from a point of mobility and being able to feel well in life. Movement also affects the brain, because the brain's in charge of all the movement that we make. And of course, movement affects the mind, because the mind goes through the brain to make those decisions and choices and establish those beliefs. The brain and the body also have to do with the movement of the emotions. Many times we might dance or work out or exercise to help process or move emotions through our body. So movement to me is a very important part of my daily practice. And it also nourishes my spiritual self. It can cause me to release those endorphins and have a better outlook on life. It can cause me to remind myself of who I really am, who I want to be, and how I want to relate to others and the world around me. So I'm going to show you a simple tool. There are 21 different tools in the Ageless Grace program, and this is one of them, and it's called Spelling Bee. It's something simple that you could invite into your day and do anywhere, anytime, as long as you have a chair. So Seated causes our brain to engage with our body and decide how would we do this from a seated position. So you don't need lots of space, you don't need lots of equipment. All you need is a little music and some bare feet or feet in socks and a chair and the willingness to play a little bit. Play is a word I haven't mentioned until now, but play is a form of grace that we can invite into our lives. It usually involves taking a little risk at looking silly or trying something new or discovering something we haven't done before or doing something that we have done before but in a different way. So I invite you to take your shoes off, sit in a comfortable chair, and I'll play a little music. You can play any music that you like when you're doing this on your own. And we're going to do a little spelling bee. So what is spelling bee? It's not spelling on a piece of paper. It's not spelling out loud. It's spelling with body parts like elbows and your nose and your belly button. And so right away, it's silly, it's playful, it's uplifting. It adds just a few moments of fun and joy and possibly grace into your life. So let's play a little bit of spelling bee. So the word we're going to spell, no surprise, is grace in upper and lowercase cursive. Use your two hands to write the word grace in the air, large. Write it 3 or 4 times. Grace, G-R-A-C-E. If English isn't your first language, write it in your language. The word that is the equivalent of grace. G-R-A-C-E. Now, I'd like you to write the word grace with one foot. G-R-A-C-E. Capital G, lowercase R-A-C-E. Write it 2 or 3 times. I hope you're smiling. G-R-A-C-E. Now you can spell this in block letters. Do it with the other leg. You can spell it in Japanese or Arabic. You can spell it in one letter at a time, block printed letters. It's totally up to you when you practice this on your own. I'm just giving you a template to follow. Now with both elbows, write the word grace. G-R-A-C-E. G-R-A-C-E. One more time. Something really fun. We're going to spell grace with our belly button. Here we go. G-R-A-C-E. I don't know about you, but that really works out my sense of humor. G-R-A-C-E. G-R-A-C-E. Now, how about your nose? G-R-A-C-E. Grace. One more time. Grace. And then let's spell grace with our backs. G-R-A-C-E. G-R-A-C-E. Now on the floor, write the word grace with your foot. And write it with this foot. Now that was totally silly and playful, but look how much movement you got out of it. All your joints, ligaments, and tendons, and maybe there's a smile on your face because it's about having a good time and yet moving, nourishing and feeding our brains, activating the primary functions of the brain, and stimulating the body. creating some positive emotions, and perhaps inviting in a little more grace in your body. So if you'd like to know more about the other 20 tools of Ageless Grace, please visit our website, agelessgrace.com. Again, agelessgrace.com. There are classes, workshops, seminars, even a 14-hour certification that you can take and be able to share this program with other people. So I hope you've enjoyed being with me as we do a little of living a graceful life. I want to remind you that it's never too late to begin making choices to create the life that you want to live. And I always like to end my program up with a question. And that is this today. What if every one of us watching made the decision to create some time for grace in our lives this week? Not the ones that are spontaneous and unexpected and surprising or bestowed by the divine or another person, but the grace that we bestow upon ourselves. What if you carved out a little time in your calendar, on your day timer, on your cell phone, and said, that's my time for grace. I'm going to invite it in. You might be surprised at what happens when you create a window of opportunity, when you make a change or a choice for change. You might be surprised what shows up and what can happen. I think if every one of us made that choice to invite more grace into our lives this week, that it might just change the world. Thank you for joining me on Living a Graceful Life. And for those of you who are on here live, you might want to stay on after this episode and join us for some conversation where we can talk back and forth a little bit about the things that I've discussed tonight. So I want to remind you that there's the physical aspect of yourself that you want to nourish. There is the mental aspect of yourself. There is the emotional aspect. And there is the spiritual aspect. All of those are equally important and deserve to be nourished. And the only person who can really nourish each one of those things is you. You're the one who makes those decisions, whether they be small, like what color am I going to wear today, or where am I going to sit when I listen to my music today, or where am I going to walk when I take my walk. All of those things are in your hands, and you can increase the grace quotient, the grace factor in your life by simply choosing to make choices that invite in more grace. So once again, don't forget, you're the one in charge. You're the one who can begin to make choices to create the life that you want, and no one else. Thank you for being here with me on Living a Graceful Life.